The elections in Thailand did not solve the country's political crisis, even though the ruling Pheu Thai party and its leader Yingluck got the most votes. Turnout was low. Part of the blame goes to anti-Yingluck protesters who blockaded polling places in and around the capital, Bangkok. That means not enough people were elected to form a quorum in parliament. By-elections are to be held, but no one knows quite when. Meantime, protesters continue to rally around government buildings. Their numbers seem to have shrunk, but those that remain are determined.
The reason for me to be here is to support an election after the reform. Actually, I'm not quite sure what reform we should carry out, but as far as I know, there is corruption and embezzlement in our country, so reform is very necessary.
The protesters want to drive Yingluck totally out of politics. They say her government is corrupt, charged with everything from embezzlement to vote buying. They also say Yingluck is under the thumb of her brother, Thaksin. He's living in exile to escape charges of abuse of power, but he's suspected of running the government via teleconferencing. The protesters want a so-called People's Council to run the country until political reforms are made. A new twist is that the country's rice farmers are also angry now. They are a key block of support for Yingluck, but the government's been unable to pay them for this year's harvest. She promised farmers a floor price for their crops, but the program is deeply in the red, and a key customer, China, just canceled its purchase of Thai rice. Now, most of the analysis from American commentators and the media has been simplified. The storyline goes something like this. It's a power struggle between a minority who live in and around the capital, Bangkok, and everyone else. The anti-Yingluck protesters are middle-class led, some even say manipulated by the country's old elite. The protesters claim Yingluck's government is illegitimate and corrupt, but the Western narrative goes on to say that the protesters just don't like the fact that Yingluck and her brother Thaksin are popular and have won all 5 recent elections. So the conclusion, the protesters only like elections when they win. Well, Fuadi Pitsuwan, himself a Thai, is a fellow at the Pacific Forum, a division of the U.S.-based Center for Strategic and International Studies. He thinks this analysis is wrong in some key respects, and he joins us now. Welcome to LinkAsia.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, why is this black and white picture of what's going on in Thailand an oversimplification in your mind?
I think it's an oversimplification because such a story is easy to sell and it fits well into the Western construct of what a struggle for democracy ought to be. This narrative of David versus Goliath or poor peasants fighting against richer urban middle class make a great news story. I'm sure you agree with that as a journalist. But then the truth is, it's so much more complex. It's so complex that I told some of my American friends that if you are confused about Thai politics, then you're probably understanding something correctly. Both sides have made their fair share of mistakes, but then both sides also have merits in their struggle.
So to continue that thought, you say it's a very complex situation. What are some of the key complexities you're talking about?
I think if anything, this is a clash between 2 values of democracy, which technically should go hand in hand. You have one side of the political spectrum that favors process, emphasizes form over substance, and give undue priority to elections. But this notion has been abused by populism under Thaksin and his sister, and the country economy is on the verge of probably, they are owning, and you have mentioned before, they are owning the farmers a lot of money, and it's not going to work. But then you have the other group, who put more weight on the spirit and substance of democracy, and then that would require a robust check and balance system. But then these group of people who identify with this notion, don't realize that you can't achieve through democratic means without, by suspending the electoral process.
Well, what do you think of the protesters' platforms? For example, the appointed People's Council that they want to make reforms before there's another general election.
I personally think it's a well-intentioned idea that is probably not going to work, and it's really difficult to achieve because you have a sizable electorate who would see this as a rollback of democracy, and that in itself is problematic. I don't think you can really suspend democracy and hope to restart Thailand. Similar efforts have been tried in the past, including 2006 coup. The only way that the People's Council idea might work talk and compromise in order to make the reform more inclusive and in order to make the two notions of democracy that I mentioned earlier, go hand in hand. The government has the onus of creating an atmosphere that would allow for some compromise. And the protest leaders should also know that a true reform can't take place without, including pro-government supporters as well.
So that is the gray area. It's
Yep.
perception. Sometimes perception is everything, right? Thank you, Fuadi.
Thank you very much.
Fuadi Pitsuwan is the Honda Fellow at the Pacific Forum, a division of the Washington-based Center for Strategic and International Studies.
Now on U.S. airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories. World news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.